we have with us Advocate Ishan Patkar. So before going into the deliberation, I would like to introduce our today's speaker, Mr. Ishan Patkar. Mr. Ishan Patkar is an advocate practicing in the Bombay High Court. He is a chartered accountant by qualification. He practices in commercial and civil laws, appearing before the NCLT in arbitrations, etc. He also appears before various forums in matters relating to taxation law. He has worked under senior advocate Mr. Sridharan as a junior for 2 years in service tax, excise, customs, and VAT litigation before starting counsel practice under Mr. Gautam Ankhad, advocate in civil and commercial law side. His book on GST Law Guide has been published by Taxman in August 2017. Another book on concept of supply by Bombay Chartered Accountant Society was published in 2018. He has published a digest on judgment of Supreme Court, Bombay High Court, and Maharashtra Sales Tax Tribunal 2009 to 2014 through the Sales Tax Practitioner Association of Maharashtra. He was a member of Indirect Tax Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He was also a member of the Indirect Tax Committee of Bombay Chartered Accountant Society, currently Managing Committee member of Goods and Service Tax Practitioner Association of Maharashtra and All India Federation Tax Practitioner Western Zone, Founder Secretary of Confederation of GST Professional and Industries, addressed numerous seminars on GST organized by various forums and associations. He is a regular contributor of GST and VAT in various journals. Good evening, Ishan sir. Over to you.
Good evening, sir. Now, today we have two judgments which we are discussing. First judgment is in the case of Mohit Minerals, which is the ocean freight judgment, and the second one is this Munjaal Manishbhai Bhatt, the land 1/3 land deduction judgment. अगर आपको मोहित मिनरल्स में क्या हुआ है समझना है तो you will read it from the end. You first read the last discussion on composite supply, then you will understand why the other grounds were rejected. Because I read it from the beginning and unfortunately till I reached the end I did not understand. ये ऐसा क्यों बोल रहे हैं जो भी बोल रहे हैं. That is a problem with the judgment. Essentially, let us take the very last. What is this ocean freight issue? Ocean freight issue basically is this: in a CIF contract, a foreign exporter, when you are importing goods, there is a contract between a foreign exporter and an Indian importer. Now, that foreign exporter enters into a further contract with a shipping line, which is also a foreign shipping line, to ferry the goods across the seas from whichever is the foreign port to the Indian port. Therefore, if I am the importer in Bombay, I am importing goods from London. The London exporter will find some foreign transporter who will transport the goods from London to Bombay. I am not directly concerned with the transport. My contract is with the foreign exporter, and the transporter's contract is with the foreign exporter only. Now, what was essentially the basis of the High Court judgment was this: that the service is entirely extraterritorial. In the sense, it is carried out outside India. The service will end the minute the goods are cleared from the Indian port, point number one. The service provider is outside India, the service recipient is outside India. In the sense, the service provider is the transporter who is also outside India, and his contract is with the service recipient who is the foreign exporter. That the importer does not receive the service. Now, this is where the Supreme Court says no. What the Supreme Court says is this, and that again I tell you, you read the last, this one first, which starts from page 141, जहाँ पे composite supply का discussion है, वो recipient पे and all, there is a lot of confusion, and what the Supreme Court has written itself is a great problem now. But it will still make some sense when you go to the last, this one, from page 141 onwards. What the Supreme Court says essentially, What the Supreme Court says essentially is this, that the foreign exporter may have a contract with the foreign transporter, correct? But transportation is also part of the contract between the foreign exporter and the Indian importer. In the sense, it is a composite contract. Foreign exporter has contracted to deliver the goods to India, to the Indian port. He may further subcontract his obligation to some third party transporter. Either वो खुद लाके दे यहाँ पे, नहीं तो अपना transporter ये करे. It is just like a normal sale of goods. Either sale of goods can be given ex works, correct? Then the buyer engages the transporter, or the sale of goods can be given to the buyer's doorstep. In such a case, though the seller is engaging transporter, still transport is a obligation of the contract between the between the seller and the purchaser, correct? The contract ultimately is not only to sell but to deliver at your doorstep. Similarly, in the case of a CIF contract, the court is saying that the contract is not just to sell goods, जो import हो रहा है, but to deliver the goods up to the Indian port, and therefore it is a composite contract. Now, that being the composite contract, Supreme Court then went to Section 8 of the CGST Act. Once it goes to Section 8 of the CGST Act, then it says that the predominant portion is that of supply of goods. Because the dominant portion is the supply of goods, the supply of services loses any relevance. Because the supply of services loses any relevance, therefore उसके ऊपर अलग से tax नहीं आ सकता. You are already taxing import of goods under that Section 5(1) proviso of IGST Act, and applying Section 8, the whole contract is a composite contract only of goods. You cannot then go into the service element separately, issue reverse charge notification by bifurcating the contract. But that is the ground on which the levy was struck down. Having understood this, now let us go into the other aspects. क्योंकि वो बाकी जो भी judgment में लिखा है, as I said, I also was not able to understand why they are calling, why the Supreme Court is saying that the Indian importer is a recipient of service, till I read the last discussion on composite supply, and which makes sense, because ultimately in the contract between the foreign exporter and the Indian importer, delivery is a part of the obligation which is part of this contract, correct? Now we'll go one by one. There is a lot of discussion on this GST Council. I'm not sure why they have discussed so much about GST Council. Apparently, the Union of India was arguing that GST Council, I'm not going into what arguments were made. बहुत सारे arguments हुए, they may not be relevant today. All other grounds were rejected only on that ground of composite supply, which I think Harish Sarve argued. No other council argued on a composite supply. Only on that ground the matter was allowed. The notification was struck down. As I said, the notification was that there was a levy of IGST on services provided by the foreign exporter on with the transporter, that CIF contract, which was till the goods reached the customs port, and that was also then reverse charged on the Indian importer. The first question which was dealt with was, what is the status of the GST Council's recommendations? Again, I don't know why there is so much hue and cry कि ऐसे Supreme Court ने बोल दिया GST Council के recommendation binding नहीं है, लेकिन नहीं है binding. There was nothing in the act ever written. I know there were a lot of commentators saying that GST Council, whatever it decides, is final, that parliament and state legislature cannot go beyond it. That is not written in the act. If you see the IGST, CGST and SGST act, only in case of delegated legislation, only in that limited case, these GST Council recommendations are binding. There is nothing in the constitution itself to say that the GST Council's recommendations are binding. मुझे तो एक पता है, somewhere where I was speaking, one of the co-chairmen, in fact, even suggested. 1 minute. One of the co-chairmen even suggested that जो state government law pass करता है, they have no power to pass anything which parliament has not approved. That state government has no power to enact a different law than what parliament has brought into force. Fundamental एक समझ लेते हैं Indian constitution क्या है. Under the Indian constitution, parliament and the state legislatures are considered supreme in their legislative functions, correct? Unless there is some provision in the constitution which restricts the legislative power, like fundamental rights, etc. There is also something called a basic structure of the constitution. What is basic structure of the constitution? That Keshwananda Bharati judgment. That even constitution cannot be amended to change the basic structure of the constitution. Now, one of the basic features of our constitution is that there are two houses of parliament. One is Lok Sabha, second is Rajya Sabha, correct? It's a bicameral system that people are electing, that elections or representative democracy is also a feature of our the constitution. All of this has not been discussed at length in the judgment, but ऊपर से ये सबको touch upon किया है. Now the question is, can even the constitution be amended to create a third chamber of legislature? लोक सभा और राज्य सभा के ऊपर कोई GST council नाम का कर सकते हैं क्या? The answer is no. Even constitution under Keshwananda Bharati, because parliament and the state legislatures are supreme, unke field mein there can be no third body which can dictate laws to them. They are supreme. Subject to fundamental rights, no one can do anything to them. Correct? There cannot be, therefore, a third legislative body which is dictating the laws to these two bodies. That is one point. Second point is the question of elected representatives. I, as a citizen, I am casting a vote to elect my whoever is the candidate to parliament and to the state legislature. GST council to pura unelected hai. It's a body of ministers. Even if the constitution was amended to create a third legislature, जहां पे वापस आप elect कर रहे हैं लोगों को, फिर भी that is still okay. But to say that a body like parliament and the state legislature, which is an elected body, उसको एक body of ministers dictate करेगा, that is totally reprehensible. Anyone who suggested also that the GST council can bind parliament and state legislature was therefore, that simply cannot happen. No court would have applied. ऐसा constitution में amendment है ही नहीं जो बोलता है कि parliament and state legislature are bound by what the GST council says. And had such an amendment been brought in, that amendment would have been struck down on two grounds. One, under Keshwananda Bharati, parliament and state legislature के ऊपर कोई नहीं जा सकता. Correct? They are the premium legislative body. हाँ, उनके नीचे कोई भी आ सकता है, ऊपर नहीं जा सकता. Second, that this is a representative form of government, a body of ministers. I will again emphasize, the GST council is a body of ministers. It is an unelected body. आपको कितना भी उनसे प्यार हो, they are unelected at the end of the day. They cannot dictate laws to elected representatives. It is reprehensible. It is totally contrary to our system of government. And such an amendment, had it even been made, could never have passed Supreme Court's this one. अभी कोई मुझे कल ही बोल रहा था कि महाराष्ट्र से इलेक्टेड ये जाते हैं, कौन जाता है? As far as I know, if there is anyone else, you can correct me. There are some deputy commissioners going. There is finance minister को कोई गांव व्यू में वो हुआ होगा elect, correct? But it is not like all the members of the state legislature are being represented on the GST council. That is point number one. Second, there are other people from other states also. Now, with respect to SGST, which is a state law, as a citizen, I have a right that some other states representatives should not interfere. ये कहने को थोड़ा ये लगता है. See, we are now discussing constitutional law. तो थोड़ा ये लगता है कि अरे सब states अलग अलग करेंगे या क्या सब, all of that is correct. But at the end of the day, as a matter of constitutional law, some other state, Telangana ke representatives cannot have any say on how the state legislature of Maharashtra is enacting its laws. अब रह गई बात that all the states will pull in different directions. That was happening in that also. But somewhere, and the Supreme Court has also recognized that somewhere that is required. It is not as if there is an overwhelming share of the central government, overwhelming vote of the central government in the GST Council. And the court has very rightly also held that the GST Council is not a political body, because there are various political systems, various political parties in some states. ये लिखा है judgment में. In some states, the party in the center and the party in the state will be the same. In some states, the party in center and party in the states will not be the same. Petroleum के ऊपर इतना जो झगड़ा चल रहा है वो इसी के वजह से चल रहा है. The center keeps blaming the non-BJP ruled states for not cooperating. Therefore, GST Council is not an apolitical body. वहाँ भी politics चलते हैं. जो parties are against, are not in favor of BJP, वो अपना कुछ ना कुछ चलाते हैं. जो बीजेपी के फेवर में है वो सेंटर को अपना माइंड ना अप्लाई किए बिना सेंटर के हिसाब से चले जाते हैं. So therefore, in such a situation, it is difficult to have a system where the GST Council controls everything. Now they have also compared with the bill which was brought in, I think, in UPA era, 2011 में लाया था जो Constitution Amendment Bill, in which every state and the central government had veto power. तो ठीक है, consensus होता है तो ठीक है, सबके जो issues है वो accommodate होते हैं. But we don't have a consensus system now. We have a majority system in which 1/3 vote is by the central government. And in such a case, there is a very good chance that all the BJP ruled parties, all the BJP ruled states will band together against the non-BJP ruled states. Now, this is not something new. BJP versus new non-BJP, ये अगर कांग्रेस सेंटर में होता तो भी यही होता है. आई एम नॉट ऐसे saying anything against any particular political party. ये सेम होता अगर कोई दूसरी पार्टी सेंटर में होती, करेक्ट. बट द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जब अमेंड हुआ, they foresaw this, that ultimately there will be political compulsions. And when you don't have a veto system, you have a majority vote majority type system. In such a case, there is a possibility that the states which have the same political party as the center will band together with the center and oppress the other states. इसके लिए the state governments are not bound by the decisions made by the GST Council. The rule-making authority is that also only because the Act provides. Constitution में वो भी नहीं लिखा है कि rule-making authority is bound by this one, क्या GST Council. It is just because in our SGST Act, CGST Act, on the recommendations of GST Council सब जगह लिखा है, इसलिए. उसमें भी कहा अभी ट्रान 1 में I remember the recommendation was up to 31st December. They issued notification only up to 27 December. So it's not like that even the GST Council recommendations are always followed when rule making is taking place. So this concludes the discussion on the first issue. which is what is the status of the GST Council. In VAT also, when they started off, everything was hunky-dory. By the time GST came, VAT every state was taking their own, making their own laws. Because if you see in Maharashtra, we have that internal circular where your ledger confirmation and this one is accepted, CA certificate. It is the commissioner, state commissioner in Maharashtra had the foresight to bring out such a circular, but I am not sure had this been tabled in GST Council, it would have passed, because I have till now noticed that the state authorities, at least in Maharashtra, are more open-minded than the central authorities. Central authorities are looking at input tax credit जैसे ये जो input tax credit लेता है ये तो चोरी है, जितना कर सके इनको दो ही मत. And even today, I don't think the central government has. If anyone has any other view, or if anyone has any circular to show, but except for Maharashtra, the central government or even no other state government has attempted to bring in the kind of circular which Maharashtra has done. And that therefore shows that because there is this liberty with the state governments, they can also bring beneficial steps. It is not like वो diverge हो गया, so it is always going to be for the worse. We'll take all questions, etc. at the end, not now. Then yes, the next issue is the next issue which is there is a bit difficult for me also to understand. I don't know why they have written what they have written. What the Supreme Court seems to have done on the question of extraterritoriality, for example. Before we go to extraterritoriality, let us see how they have upheld the notification otherwise on the other grounds. It is ultimately struck down, but there were certain other arguments which have been rejected. Now, as I said, वो आप composite supply पढ़ते हो, तभी वो थोड़ा it makes sense, but otherwise, I found it very difficult to digest whatever was written with respect to recipient. So what is the Supreme Court said essentially? This is how I understand it. आपके section 13(9) में लिखा है कि place of supply for transportation of goods by mail or courier, etc., is the destination of the goods. Correct? Is the destination of goods. Now that they have read into the definition of recipient of service, and there is a great confusion. There are multiple passages where it is written that the contract is between the foreign exporter and the foreign transporter. At multiple points, the Supreme Court admits that the consideration flows from the foreign exporter to the foreign transporter. But then, आप अगर section 293 देखेंगे, there are three kinds of recipients. The first kind of recipient is where there is obviously where consideration flows. Then the person who is paying the consideration is the recipient. Where there is no consideration, the person who is receiving the services is the recipient. And the third one is now irrelevant for us. One of the arguments is that there can't be two recipients for a single transaction, for a single contract, which is correct. And there can't be two recipients for a single transaction. Now, if you read it with composite supply, you realize then that in the foreign exporter or Indian importer, transportation is already an obligation, though the foreign exporter may have subcontracted it to someone else. Correct? is already in obligation, and transportation का obligation which the foreign exporter has taken upon himself is a service provided to the Indian importer. अगर आप वो angle से देखेंगे, then it is very clear. But somehow, before reaching that composite supply, the Supreme Court has gone into that recipient ka definition and, with due respect, created a mess. What they have said is, even though the consideration flows from the foreign exporter to the foreign transporter, yet there can be one more recipient where there is no consideration than the person who receives the service. और उसके लिए उन्होंने 13(9) इन्वोक किया कि 13(9) shows that the person who is receiving the service is where the destination of goods is. ये थोड़ा आप पढ़ेंगे ना समझेगा नहीं. But when you read it in the light of the last part of the judgment, then it suddenly falls into place. Correct? Otherwise, it is very confusing till you reach that last part. That is, that there are two contracts, correct? One contract is between the foreign exporter and the foreign recipient. That is the normal service contract, the pure transportation, foreign exporter and the foreign transporter. But then the second contract is between the foreign exporter and the Indian importer, in which also the transportation obligation is there. ठीक है? अभी उसका रेसिपिएंट 293 के अंदर यही है, कौन? अपना इंडियन इंपोर्टर है. बट इंस्टेड ऑफ एक्सप्रेसिंग इट इन दिस सिंपल वे, दे हैव क्रिएटेड अ खिचड़ी बाय सेइंग कि नहीं, उसके साथ भी अगर होगा फॉरेन एक्सपोर्टर और फॉरेन ट्रांसपोर्टर का ट्रांजैक्शन, स्टिल द बेनिफिट इज टू द इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्टर, देयर कैन बी अ रेसिपिएंट, फिर उसमें 13(9) लाख. इट्स वेरी वेरी कंफ्यूजिंग. It is so confusing that, in fact, I would say that the Supreme Court has to a certain extent ruined the law on recipient. They should have stuck only to the issue of composite supply. सब simply खत्म हो जाता. ये recipient को बीच में लाके, it is, there are now, Supreme Court seems to be saying there can be two recipients. Correct? आपका consideration जिसको दिया है वो भी हो सकता है और जिसको benefit मिला वो भी हो सकता है. So it's very confusing. The way we understood it was always one contract, one recipient. Correct? So in that sense, and then place of supply is for a different purpose. अब place of supply को recipient के definition में घुसा दो और उसके through read करने जाओ तो और confusing हो जाता है. I am not at all. In fact, even if I go to explain here what they have done, I have also not understood. I have also not understood because there is a confusion in that part of judgment. If you read it with the last part, then the confusion seems to clear out, which means that foreign exporter और जो foreign transporter है उनका एक contract है, वो बाजू में रख दो. Foreign exporter और Indian importer के contract में for supply of goods there is also a transportation obligation. उसका तो recipient हो सकता है भारत में. So that is okay. But as I said, instead of expressing it in these simple terms, they have created a mess all around. Now there is also the issue of extraterritoriality. That based on that GVK Industries Supreme Court has rejected. Extraterritoriality का जो issue है, that they say that there is some nexus, and extraterritoriality का जो law है, firstly remember Parliament has the power to enact extraterritorial laws. That is there in Article 245 itself, including a tax on extraterritorial events, occurrences, etc. But the Supreme Court in GVK said there should still be some nexus. I mean, nexus वो तो अपना income tax में कोई वो Walter Brothers, I think that judgment is there. तो इंडिया में assessee बैठा था, he was holding shares in some UK company. That UK company distributed, UK company was subsidiary of some, UK company had shares of some other company, parent company. वो पेरेंट कंपनी का वहां पे जो डिविडेंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूट discussion on this ocean freight judgment. Now what I'll do is I'll also quickly discuss the judgment in this Munjaal Manishbhai Bhatt. And then we'll have an interactive session and we'll also take some questions. But to conclude, ultimately, ocean freight they have won on the composite supply point. On the other points, they have not won, but it doesn't make a difference because as far as the notification is concerned, it is struck down. ये जो same, this very thing may not apply as far as your this one is concerned, service tax. Because in service tax, though there is that naturally bundled, etc., correct? That composite supply thing may still apply, but there are some differences that service tax matters, I think, are not yet adjudicated. We'll wait for that judgment. There are some parallels which can be drawn because naturally bundled concept is there even in service tax. But in service tax, goods could not be taxed at all, and therefore under the naturally bundled concept, whether the supply of goods, if something is naturally bundled with supply of goods, whether it could be excluded totally from the service tax levy, that itself is a big question. We'll have to wait for that judgment. Now this Munjaal Manishbhai Bhatt is on the issue of 1/3 land deduction. What had happened in this matter was essentially that there was an agreement for purchase of plot, a separate agreement for purchase of plot and separate agreement for construction of bungalow. और उनके अलग-अलग थे considerations. Now the authorities, they went for an advance ruling. The authorities, some of the parties went for an advance ruling. In that Munjaal Manishbhai Bhatt, the developer itself started asking for GST on the entire value of both the agreements minus 1/3 deduction for land. Now their land value was in fact much higher than that 1/3. So they clubbed, the developer was clubbing both agreements and then giving only 1/3. But the land component, the land agreement value was much more than that deduction. Now what the Gujarat High Court has said basically is, the Gujarat High Court has said that you have firstly no power to tax sale of land at all. That Schedule 3 specifically says that sale of land cannot be taxed. Now once it is said sale of land cannot be taxed and there is an agreement to tax sale, agreement to sell land separately, then that cannot be taxed at all. And I will extend that even to normal development agreements, जहाँ पे land का value may be given separately, even though there is not a separate agreement, but within that same instrument, land value is given separately, the same logic will apply. Now, where land value is not given separately, even there, land value has to be deducted. Uska mechanism lana padega. That is because in a construction, in a development agreement, ultimately, there is a transfer of property in land which is happening, which is a pure sale of land. ये डेवलपमेंट राइट और जो बड़ी बड़ी चीजें वो बाजू में रखो. Ultimately, in a development agreement, the landlord is or a society, for example, is conveyance is covenanting with a developer, and the development agreement specifically says that the forget society, that is redevelopment, a normal landlord who is covenanting with the developer, he is saying that you can build additional flats and the people who are going to get those additional flats will also get an interest in land. Now that interest in land is land itself. That is not like a lease or anything. That is a sale of land. अब पूरा लैंड सेल करो, नहीं तो उसमें से अनडिवाइडेड इंटरेस्ट सेल करो, एक ही होता है, ठीक है. So that component, even in a redevelopment agreement with respect to outside flat purchasers, उनको जो interest in land मिलता है, that cannot be taxed under Schedule 3. The larger question whether sale of land can be taxed at all in GST, that has been addressed, but not very directly, by saying that in pre-GST era land का deduction मिलता था, तो इसमें भी मिलना चाहिए. Because the GST is what? VAT plus service tax. That is not a very satisfactory way of answering the question, but that is what has been held. The larger question, whether under the Constitution, under 246A, land can be taxed or land cannot be taxed, has not been dealt with. Correct? And then there is one example which they have given to show discrimination. Why that 1/3? बाकी बहुत कुछ लिखा है उसमें, all of it is not relevant. That one example is very relevant. You have that judgment, Prashant?
Yes, I will share.
Para 101 निकालो जरा.
Meanwhile, you can put all your questions in the chat box so that we can pick it during our discussion. Thank you.
It's there on the screen.
Para 101 की आप थोड़ा नीचे आओ, दो illustrations है which shows the arbitrariness, the discrimination. Take the case of plot of land admeasuring 5,000 square yards and valued at 2.5 crores. Now, if a buyer enters into an agreement with the developer for buying the plot of land, along with getting the bungalow constructed, and the total area of the bungalow is say 500 square yards, construction value is 50 lakhs, total agreement will be 2.5 plus 50, which is 3 crores. और उसका 1/3 deduction will be 1 crore will be available towards land and the balance will be taxed. Now take the second example. However, same bungalow, construction same है, material same है, सब same है, पर land का size 2000 square yards है instead of this one, क्या 5000 square yards, or sorry 500 square yards. ऊपर कितना था?
5,000 था.
5,000 square yards, and the land $200 square yards का land है जिसका वैल्यू सिर्फ 1 crore है. 50 लाख is the same construction cost in example 1 and B, A and B. Then you have 1.5 crores और यहाँ पे 1. आप 1/3 land deduction लगाते हो तो only 50 lakhs will be available towards land, and the balance consideration of 1 crores will be taxable under GST Act. Now what the High Court is saying, that ultimately what is taxable under your GST law is only that construction service. Even after OC, you're not taxing. Forget land, you're not even taxing after OC. Your tax is only on the construction service. Now, in both the cases, whether the land is big or small, bungalow same size ka hai, material sab same hai, everything is same. But only because the land value is more and less, the construction cost value cannot change, no? So on that basis, they have said that therefore, this is against Article 14 and discriminatory. That is in short what Munjaal Manishbhai Bhatt is. उसमें कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं है, बाकी बहुत छोटा छोटा लिखा है, but that need not detail us today. Correct? Now, anyone wants to share their views on these two judgments or ask any questions? No questions. Either no one has understood or
No,
people are.
there are
Huh?
few questions. There are few questions already.
Basis of audit objection, we had paid RCM during last month along with interest for ocean freight. तो आप refund के लिए apply करो. Supreme Court ने strike down कर दिया. Now you can apply for a refund. Whether future RCM has to be paid. But in RCM you must have taken credit also, no? Refund करके फायदा क्या? आपका credit भी reverse हो जाएगा. After a SC judgment, but the interest element you can still take refund. And no future RCM is required. No, that notification is now struck down. You are not required to now pay anything else. Correct? Any other questions? If there are no questions, then हाँ, बोलो निकी मैडम, आपका क्वेश्चन नहीं आता तब तक मुझे लगता है मैंने I have not done justice to the topic.
No, sir, I am the beginner in tax actually. I am not a practitioner in taxation. That's why the question, I was hesitating in questioning, but I still.
अरे हम भी कभी बिगिनर थे. बोलिए
Sir,
बोलिए.
ये land proportion, मतलब sale of land को exempt किया schedule 3 में. उसका क्या मतलब? What are the roots? What are the reason for it? Due to.
But they didn't want to tax land. See, there is some confusion why in the constitution they have not mentioned why land constitution they have not mentioned that land is not taxed. My own matter is going on in Supreme Court in case of renting and lease of immovable property, whether under Article 246A, that Myra Yash Hotel matter is there again in June. Whether Article 246A, the word used is service. Now, if you see the definition of service, it is anything other than goods. Correct? वो इतना vague definition that itself is problematic. There are many judgments of Supreme Court saying that a lease is not a service, a transaction in land is not a service, etc. Goods तो हो नहीं सकता. But somehow they did not in the constitution make it express that the Supreme Court जो करे सो करे. But as far as this Schedule 3 is concerned, there they kept land separate. But that is only part of legislative mercy, in as much if the government thinks that they have the right to tax. As of now, they are not taxing. Tomorrow they may tax. If you see when the GST Constitution Act was passed, when it went to Rajya Sabha, there is a select committee report where this very many associations, I think all these tax associations had raised questions on whether land, why they are not expressly excluding, and the government had given an answer in the select committee that they don't want to expressly exclude, so that in the future they may include in GST specifically. So as of now, it seems that out of legislative mercy, they are not taxing. But we'll see how the Supreme Court case goes. If the Supreme Court says under 246A, they have no power to tax any kind of immovable property, फिर वो Schedule 3 में हो ना हो, उसका डिडक्शन तो मिलना ही चाहिए. ठीक है?
तो सर मुझे एक reason, I was pondering over it and I got some reason that since it is already leviable by stamp duty.
Stamp duty is a duty on instrument, not on the transaction. Stamp duty है तो भी आप दूसरा टैक्स लग सकता है. That is not the reason really, but economically they may have thought of that. That economically they may have thought कि already stamp duty इतना लगता है, उसके ऊपर ये नहीं लगाना चाहिए.
And you're saying it is on instrument and not on the transaction. How
you
far?
See, lease, in lease stamp duty लगता है. Registered lease under Transfer of Property Act and that Registration Act, a lease cannot be made without registration. उस पे stamp duty भी लगता है और ये लोग GST भी लेते हैं.
Lease, sale, anything regarding immovable property.
Correct, but So stamp duty may not be the reason. We don't know why. What may have happened that they have actually just copied service tax just as it is. When service tax was there may have been an apprehension ki whether there is something called entry 49 in the list 2, that is the state list, where tax on land and building is under the state list. So there during service tax there may have been an apprehension कि ये land element tax कर सकते हैं कि नहीं. Lease में उन्होंने कर दिया, लेकिन इसमें in construction contract they did not do it even during service tax. And if you see that schedule 2 construction contract वाला जो है service, वो तो almost छापा है service tax से. So that is why it seems that same thing is continuing. So we will see what happens in that Supreme Court matter if they say that and 246 say land cannot come at all, not only land, any right in immovable property, including your this one leasehold right, etc. Then schedule 3 हो ना हो उससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है. But as of now we don't know why they are putting schedule 3 में sale of land as exempt, because lease पे तो दोनों stamp duty और ये दोनों लग रहे हैं.
GST और stamp duty. Okay.
Under your Rent Control Act also, that section 51 or something, unless that lease agreement or even a leave and license is registered, the landlord say is not admitted before the small cause is fought. जो भी tenant बोले वही there is a presumption at least. Whatever the tenant says is correct. So even under the Rent Control Act, leave and license is also, you can say, required to be registered. Correct. But ये सब है, sorry, stamp duty is required to be paid. ये सब है, फिर भी ये नहीं है ना. Despite all of this,
मुझे वही लग रहा है कि स्पेसिफिकली लैंड के किसी भी ट्रांजैक्शन पे स्टैम्प ड्यूटी वो एक टैक्स लगा ही रहे हैं. ड्यूटी बोलो या टैक्स बोलो.
That is what I said. Leave and license and stamp duty, leave and license and lease is also subjected to stamp duty. Tomorrow, if there is a dispute, correct, your leave and license or lease agree का जो deed होता है, that is not admitted in evidence till it is stamp duty is paid. Stamp duty तो भरना ही पड़ता है, पर उसके ऊपर GST भी ले ही रहे हैं और पहले भी service tax ले ही रहे थे. So we don't know whether that stamp duty is the motivation for not for excluding sale of land. That we don't know as of now. क्या है motivation? It may be so कि lease का और leave and license का value इतना ज़्यादा नहीं रहता, तो उसके ऊपर stamp duty भी ऐसा बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं आता generally. और sale जो होता है वो बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाता है value. और उसके ऊपर stamp duty भी काफी आ जाती है फिर. As far as you may be knowing better, because I think you do a lot of conveyancing work also, but stamp duty on leave and license and lease agreements will not be as big as stamp duty on outright sale, because simply the value is, the consideration is much higher in outright sale. Correct?
But it is mandatory to register each and every agreement whatsoever is the transaction regarding land or
that is or right, but आपने जो बोला कि शेड्यूल 3 में क्यों नहीं है, उसका शायद ये होगा कि लीज के ऊपर वो GST लगाते हैं, लीज एंड लाइसेंस, despite stamp duty, maybe because the stamp duty, actual stamp duty may not be that high. But अगर मैं the plot of land, if I have to outright sell in Bombay, it will go in crores of rupees. But if I have to lease it or put it on leave and license, शायद उतना नहीं आता, उसको उतना value नहीं होता फिर. That may be the reason. I don't know. Anyways, any other question? बहुत सारे आ गए यार अपने में. Whether composite term is applicable for outside India transaction. That is not the issue. Once they have held that the transaction is covered, basically they have said that composite supply, the definition is applicable to section 5(1). का जो इंपोर्ट होता है उसको एप्लीकेबल है, करेक्ट? कंपोजिट सप्लाई का डेफिनेशन. Now it can be used other way also. For example, there may be a predominantly service transaction, पर उसके लिए कुछ goods का import होना है. Goods के import पे तो आपको customs भरना ही पड़ता है, भले if it is part of a service transaction or not. But whether IGST then cannot be separately again taken on. IGST cannot be taken on that, because if composite supply definition is applicable and the whole transaction predominant is your service, then you cannot have IGST, no? आप अगर ये सॉफ्टवेयर वाले कस्टमाइजेशन वाले देखें, it is declared as a service in schedule 2. अभी वो सॉफ्टवेयर के साथ कुछ CD/BD import हुआ, correct? Now under that, I think Tata Consultancy Services judgment, that CD is considered goods, उसके ऊपर आपको ये भरना पड़ता है customs duty. But as far as this one is concerned, GST is concerned, it may go into services because it is customized goods. फिर उसके ऊपर आप IGST नहीं भर सकते, इतना माथा खपी करना पड़ेगा. अभी बिल ऑफ एंट्री फाइल करेंगे तभी. वो ऑफिसर को तो ये सब नहीं समझने वाला, वो तो IGST लगा के बैठ जाएगा. ITC eligibility 2 grounds: tax is not paid under IGST Act, so not qualify as ITC, whether services are received under section 16. I am not sure ये क्या पूछा है exactly. In RCM, you are anyways paying the tax, no? Or on import of goods under section 5(1) proviso, you are paying tax and you are taking credit. I have purchased flat 2021. Now I am eligible to get refund on GST paid, including the land cost last year. No separate agreement. नहीं, separate agreement नहीं होगा, तो then you will have to still value, no? Land deduction कैसे तो उनको देना तो चाहिए. Then you go, there is a residual clause in valuation rules. On that basis, you can apply कि आप मेरे को land deduction दो. If there is no mechanism at all, where there is a lump sum agreement without separate this one, क्या आपके agreement में, same agreement में land cost दिया होगा, you have no problem. पर अगर वो agreement में land cost नहीं दिया होगा, so you can go under the valuation rules and tell him कि on a reasonable basis you exclude the land value, maybe on ready reckoner value or something. ठीक है? I understand through attending another webinar, a benefit of IGST on ocean freight is not available when import is under FOB or even under CIF. Also, when shipping line is Indian shipping line. Joint webinar late, hence not sure what was discussed. नहीं, ये जो है ना जजमेंट अपना, just 1 minute. The entry is transport of goods in a vessel, including services provided or agreed to be provided by a person located in non-taxable territory to a person located in non-taxable territory. Correct? So this is more, this entry itself is for CIF contracts, not for FOB contracts. Then, or नहीं है क्या questions? Anyways, if there are other questions, otherwise we'll end the seminar.
Ishan ji,
Yes, sir.
can I speak? My question is composite supply is defined under CGST Act, and it says that it means supply made by a taxable person to a recipient. So only this concept is restricted to the taxable person only. Then
But now
it can
Supreme Court has
info-
applied in section 8 that word taxable is not used. No, that is what I believe. Supreme Court has applied it to this one also. You are right, but In section 8, they don't talk about taxable supply. And that the Supreme Court has not realized what you are saying. You are correct that the foreign exporter is not in fact a taxable person, but they have not realized. And you can in fact use this, क्योंकि ये बहुत जगह पे प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था कि कंपोजिट सप्लाई में टैक्सेबल यूज किया है, सेक्शन 8 में टैक्सेबल यूज नहीं किया है. Now you can use this judgment to say that now even if it is not by a taxable person or that this one is not taxable supply, still you have to get the benefit. But you are right that Supreme Court has not realized.
No, my question is once the term is defined, composite supply, then how there can be any other meaning for that composite supply?
They have not realized. No. Section 8 में they actually the Supreme Court went on the basis of Section 8. आप पढ़ेंगे तो Section 8 पे पूरा है और उसमें taxable word use नहीं किया है. और though that two subsection 30 which is composite supply that was extracted, मेरे वो ध्यान में नहीं आया Supreme Court के. They have not realized that. So in fact what you are saying is right. Tomorrow there may be problem even on this ground. But समझो, I will go one step ahead. In the European Union, from where we have borrowed all this naturally bundled composite and mixed supply, वहाँ पे तो definition भी नहीं है composite supply का, correct? Still the courts there have given it a judicial meaning. तो जहाँ पे ये composite supply का definition apply नहीं होता, वहाँ पे same principles will apply. Because even in European Union, they see the predominant element and then the ancillary element is considered part of the predominant element. Even in sales tax, we had that. So composite supply का जो definition है, that is not some magic wand. I mean, जहाँ पे वो apply नहीं होता, वहाँ पे वो European Union का आप judgments apply कर सकते हो. यहाँ पे भी Supreme Court का है sales tax में और what is the meaning of ancillary, the dominant nature test, etc. Now that is there. I think there are two more queries. Flat holder charged GST at 12%, but actual GST was 8%. Since affordable housing, is the flat holder eligible for? Yeah, these are not concerned. And the next question also on that Indian shipping line, that I will have to check because today we are only concerned with CIF contracts under this judgment. FOB contracts we are not really directly concerned with. If there are any questions on this judgment or any views anyone wants to share, otherwise we'll close the session.
How does one calculate the exact amount of land deduction towards a flat unit?
आप ready reckoner value ले सकते हो. If you see ready reckoner, the way it is calculated is that all the agreements, आपका जो agreement register होता है, that again Nikki madam will know more because she does all these land related conveyance matters. But
matters में ना land को अलग और building को अलग valuation और वो भी taxation.
What is basically done when you have ready reckoner is published is that all the registered instruments which are issued during an year, समझो बॉम्बे में जितने भी लैंड फ्लैट परचेज एग्रीमेंट एक्सेट्रा लैंड के ट्रांजैक्शंस जितने भी रजिस्टर हुए होंगे वो सब का वो लोग बाय सम फॉर्मूला एक एवरेज निकालते हैं so that essentially that ready reckoner value is somewhat of a average only of all the values throughout Bombay. Bombay थोड़ा आगे पीछे होता है but then you can't
No, what I have seen is, see, I mean, a ready reckoner value is for a certain survey number, a certain area. What generally does a ready reckoner is provided, and ready reckoner has three values.
आसपास का ले लो ना, आप अपने आसपास का ले लो.
नहीं, say for example, the ready reckoner is of the land, and I am taking a ready reckoner deduction of the undivided share in the land.
What is an undivided share in the land? आप उसका proportion निकालो.
हाँ, तो ये मतलब you want to say that, say for example, if I have
Undivided
1,000
share
square
means
feet
not
land,
a proportionate share. इसमें सीए का
correct, but
दिमाग
how?
लगा के थोड़ा रेशियो लगा के निकाल लो.
नहीं, but क्या होता है, जैसे मैं इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ, say for example I had 1,000 square feet land and say the FSI was say 2,000 square feet. I'm giving an example. अभी मैंने TDR लगा के इसको 3,000 कर दिया. So how do one take it? So 3:1, say 3,000 square feet built on 1,000 square feet. So
There is
do
a
I take a
larger
deduction?
issue whether sale of land will include sale of FSI and all. It has to include, पर आपको वो रेडी रेकनर में से निकाल के करना, अदरवाइज देयर इज नो. इफ यू लीव इट टू द ऑफिसर, वो तो क्या, वो तो 1/3 से भी कम कर देगा, ₹1 का डिडक्शन दे देगा सबके लिए.
And because the problem starts with there, कि आज FSI मेरे हिसाब से आज 1 है, कल FSI UDCPR आता है, there are changes in the rules where new sanctions being
रेडी
given, new
रेकनर
FSI.
वैल्यू इज द लेटेस्ट वैल्यू. नो, आपको
नहीं,
थोड़ी
agreed,
10 साल पहले का
नहीं,
निकालना.
problem starts with the undivided share. When I say I am able to construct 2,000 square feet on 1,000.
Undivided, if there are, for example, 4 co-owners, there is 1 acre land, there are 4 co-owners. Flat purchasers are also in a sense 17 flats का society होगा, all 4 are co-owners. There are judgments of Bombay High Court saying that it is not really ownership right, but it is something like ownership. ये थोड़ा वो
नहीं,
है.
agreed, but the problem starts with change in FSI.
Wait. It is still something like, आपका FSI का जो valuation होगा वो proportionately ले लो. I mean,
change in FSI.
Then it will go up. It has to be, the valuation has to be at the date at which the agreement is registered, no? Because under 17 Registration Act, that transfer will never take place, no, till that this one is registered.
And what happens to if I apply?
आपको assessment के date का दिखा मैं, जो date है.
नहीं, मैं बोल रहा हूँ, problem कहाँ आता है? If people apply TDR and construct out of it, so will there be a deduction allowed on that part of land or no deduction because you have consumed services to provide services? I have bought TDR and provided construction.
Why not? It has to be allowed.
No, but that is service, no? That is, there is no land deduction as such.
Part of land only. वो एक है litigation वाला मामला कि land versus immovable property. These are rights in land. They are not actually considered land. वो देखेंगे. That is why that Supreme Court will wait. Know what they say. Leasehold interest is also what, an interest in land.
Because once they say this is service, I mean TDR is a service, तो problem आ सकता है when how to determine deduction.
अभी मेरे को दे दो matter, अपन देख लेंगे.
No,
you are right. There is an issue, but according to me होना चाहिए, पर थोड़ा देखना भी पड़ेगा. देखना पड़ेगा in the sense that we'll have to first see what is the outcome of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is going to decide that Myra-Ash matter in 2 months. They have said they will decide. तो उसके basis पे, because see, peculiarly this word land only refers to the surface area of land actually. It doesn't refer to rights in land. And now your Cheda housing, people brandish that Justice Ripillo's judgment in Cheda housing saying that TDR is immovable property. There is no question TDR is immovable property. But there has always been a distinction between the word land and immovable property. Now they in Schedule 3 specifically use the word land. They did not use the word immovable property. आप service tax में देखो, that word specifically immovable property was used. So उसके वजह से that gives me some hesitation, you know, while कि वो इतना easy नहीं है land में TDR, FSI सब डालना.
Sir, but why
sale of, yes,
property, does it cover anything apart from land?
वो problem है madam. There are equally compelling views on both sides. कि land is land, not rights in land. क्योंकि the word generally used, even if you see Cheda housing or that some one more judgment, I think Roshan Dalji's judgment which followed Cheda housing, Vivijan,
Sarvodaya Builders.
Cheda housing, only Roshan Dalvi's judgment is also, they are following Cheda housing. That said that this is removable property by using that Transfer of Property Act ka definition, that these are rights attached to land, rights in land, etc. But they have not said that it is land.
It's not land. Right
लीगल
cannot.
डिक्शनरी, आप लीगल डिक्शनरीज भी खोलो, इतना क्लियर नहीं है. मैंने एक टाइम पे इस पे बहुत रिसर्च किया कि आप लैंड का कहीं पे भी डेफिनेशन देखो, नो वन सेज दैट लैंड इंक्लूड्स ऑल द राइट्स इन लैंड.
नहीं बने दोनों कॉन्सेप्ट अलग हो.
At the same time, when you sell the land, all the rights automatically go with it. So you can argue that. I am arguing that in one matter, कि sale of land करेंगे तो these rights automatically go with it.
Exactly. So it cannot be even detached.
Correct.
तो अगर separate नहीं,
the better way, there was some solicitor who had sought opinion last month only. ये same issue पे मैंने बोला उनको, आप land cost में पूरा दिखा दो in the agreement itself, instead of giving separate value for FSI and all, you show everything in land cost. Finish it off. I don't know. I'll ask what has happened to that. Because at the stage of
नहीं सर FSI और application आता है. इसके लिए लैंड के साथ हम लोग उसको FSI और TDR का जो मामला है ना, वो लैंड के कॉस्टिंग से बहुत अलग implications आते हैं. इसके लिए हम लोग लैंड का कॉस्टिंग और FSI TDR का कॉस्टिंग अलग निकालते हैं.
That is your internal costing, but the issue is a normal agreement for sale of land, correct? उसके साथ तो FSI TDR जाएगा ही ना. आप स्पेसिफिकली लिखो अग्रीमेंट में भी ना लिखो, उसके साथ तो जो भी है सब जाएगा, करेक्ट. नाउ जनरली आपका अगर ये होगा क्या, सेल ऑफ लैंड होगा, तो आई हैव नॉट सीन अग्रीमेंट्स वेयर इन एन अग्रीमेंट फॉर सेल ऑफ लैंड कोई FSI और TDR तो खैर से आता नहीं, FSI का और वैल्यू भी अलग से दिखा है. There is just one clause saying that all these rights are also transferred. और वो clause ना डालो तो भी they get transferred. TDR तो नहीं ना, TDR अलग से ही होता है, FSI तो ट्रांसफर हो जाता है लैंड के साथ.
No, people make sale of FSI agreement separately. Without
land का agreement ही है.
जहाँ दोनों है तो the principle is land. Why? I mean, you can't sell FSI separately.
This solicitor was asking me that अलग दिखाओ कि same दिखाओ. मैंने बोला भैया क्यों दिखाना है अलग? Why do you want an headache? हाँ. Solicitors are used to Bombay High Court ना, उनको लगता है हर चीज Bombay High Court जाती है, उनको पता नहीं ऑफिसर के पास जाता है, कुछ समझता नहीं है.
No, people seek exemptions, income tax exemptions on sale of FSI. That is where it.
मेरे को GST आता है सिर्फ. इनकम टैक्स वाले को बुलाओ और उसको पूछो अभी क्या करेंगे. Okay, any other questions? 2 more messages. No, there are some. हाँ, yes madam, बोलिए. We can't hear you.
Sorry, जो लीज का बोला ना आपने, लीज इज द सर्विस. तो आईनॉक्स के जो जजमेंट्स है, इंक्लूडिंग एपेलेट अथॉरिटी तमिलनाडु या वहीं से है ना, तो उसमें जो 17(5) का जो रिस्ट्रिक्शन है, उसमें आइनॉक्स की प्लांट उन्होंने क्रेडिट ब्लॉक किया, बट वो 17(5) में तो उसको एग्जेम्पशन मिलना चाहिए ना, बिकॉज ही इज इम्प्लीमेंटिंग प्लांट ऑन दैट लीज्ड प्रॉपर्टी. प्लांट एंड मशीनरी का एग्जेम्पशन है कि उनका ITC ब्लॉक नहीं होगा.
देखना पड़ेगा. I have not seen that advance.
अच्छा, okay.
Advance ruling मैं देखता भी नहीं, because of the day I start reading advance ruling, I will forget law. And I advise you also don't read advance ruling. एडवांस रूलिंग्स आर डिसाइडेड बाय दीज डिपार्टमेंट ऑफिसर्स ओनली, जो कुछ भी करके तोड़ मरोड़ के गवर्नमेंट के फेवर में देते हैं. Since you are a beginner, it is my sincere advice to you कि आप एडवांस रूलिंग मत पढ़ो. There are a lot of, आपको कुछ पढ़ना ही है तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट हाई कोर्ट पढ़ो. तूने सब
सर,
लॉस का.
यही पूछ, ये क्या जजमेंट है, इससे अच्छा प्रॉपर्टी लॉ ही हमारा अच्छा था, मैं क्यों टैक्स में आई.
तो आपको नहीं ना, आपको जीएसटी भी करना है.
मैं आ गई अभी, पता चला ना जीएसटी कितना कम है.
Anyways, don't read advanced rulings. They will ruin your view of the law. बहुत ही खराब आते हैं एडवांस रूलिंग्स. By their
वो
very
देखा
nature,
मैंने
they are
आगे.
biased.
But they are binding on the parties, no?
वो मेरे पे तो बाइंडिंग नहीं है ना. एडवांस रूलिंग का इशू ऐसा है कि डिपार्टमेंट ऑफिसर के फेवर में होगा डिपार्टमेंट से, तो वो उसको बाइंडिंग मान ही लेता है, दो इट इज नॉट बाइंडिंग ऑन अदर पीपल. उसके अगेंस्ट होगा, जनरली अगेंस्ट होते नहीं, रेयरली कोई एक आता है टैक्स पेयर के फेवर में, तो वो बोलेगा दिस इज नॉट बाइंडिंग. आई डोंट नो इफ यू हैव डन
लेकिन हाइट तो
असेसमेंट्स
उधर,
और I don't know if you have done assessments
no,
or proceedings before officers in GST. उनको ऑर्डर पास करना होता है इसलिए वो करते हैं. दे आर नॉट, आप उसमें कुछ भी लिखेंगे, उनको कुछ लिखना होता है, पेजेस भरने होते हैं इसलिए भर देते हैं. एनीवे,
ये दोनों मैंने पढ़ा आइनॉक्स का, तभी मुझे वो पता चल जाएगा कि ये एडवांस रूलिंग और इवन एपेलेट अथॉरिटी का लेवल समझ में आ गया कि भाई ये एकदम इट्स नॉट रिकमेंडेबल. मतलब वो एक्चुअली इशू क्या था कि लीज ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी उन्होंने लिया था आइनॉक्स एयर प्रोडक्ट्स ने, और 15(5) बी के अंडर उन्होंने एग्जेम्पशन क्लेम किया कि वी हैव नॉट टेकन दिस लैंड फॉर द फर्दर कंस्ट्रक्शन which we are using it for the furtherance of business, but we are using it for the machinery which is exempt
I have not
17.
read that advance
तो
ruling.
हमारा आईटीसी ब्लॉक नहीं होना. ओके,
मैंने पढ़ा नहीं है मैडम. That 17.5 वाला is the separate topic in itself. ये प्लांट एंड मशीनरी को इतने एक्सप्लेनेशन और एक्सेप्शंस है. Anyways, if there are any more questions, otherwise we'll now end the session.
One more issue.
बोलिए sir.
Can you highlight what are the Supreme Court observation as far as this while levying custom duty, they are including the freight value also, and on which IGST is already paid. So whether there can be
कोई है नहीं observation.
RCM again on the same amount as service.
That is what Supreme Court has said, that it is a composite. आप import करते वक्त एक तो पूरा ले लिया, दूसरा what Supreme Court is saying कि that service value, that service element which is there in a CIF contract, that under section 8 composite supply, that disappears. No, that becomes predominant element is the supply of goods. So आप सर्विस को तो अलग से टैक्स कर ही नहीं सकते. ये एक इशू हो गया. तो वो सर्विस एलिमेंट तो अलग से, फ्रेट एलिमेंट अलग से टैक्स नहीं हो सकता. बट अंडर दैट सेक्शन 5(1) IGST प्रोवाइजो, जो आई थिंक इसका वैल्यू लेते हैं इंक्लूडिंग फ्रेट, दैट इज ओके. दैट सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैज सेड नॉट सेड एनीथिंग ऑन दैट. दैट वाज नॉट आल्सो द सब्जेक्ट मैटर. हाँ, डबल टैक्सेशन के हिसाब से उन्होंने बोला कि आप एक बार लेते हो, आप वापस ले रहे हो करके. दैट इज, क्या आगे कुछ उसके ऊपर है नहीं डिस्कशन. In fact, I don't think they have said anything specifically on double taxation, but you're right that freight value is anyways taxed at the time of import, and they're again taxing it. चलो ठीक है. Any other question? हेमंत पत्की जी को सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जज बनाना चाहिए, ये उनके ऑब्जर्वेशंस बहुत पर्टिनेंट होते हैं. You should have sat with Justice Chandrachud, then you would have written a better judgment. Anyways, Prashant bhai, let's close.
Yes, let's close. There are 2-3 questions. You want
नहीं हो
to?
गए सब.
ठीक है, चलेगा.
आपको कोई है तो पूछो.
नहीं, मेरे को कोई नहीं.
ठीक है सर.
चलेगा. Okay, thank you Ishan sir. Thank you everyone for attending, and let's meet tomorrow 6:30 for our regular intensive discussion. Okay.
Okay sir. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you everyone.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.